Torah. And the Lord sent upon them warnings in dreams, and signs in their midst, yet they hardened their hearts. Paraphrased, Numbers 12:6. Bible. For the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he does so with subtle signs to turn hearts toward righteousness. Proverbs 3:12. Quran. And we did not destroy a people except that they had been warned. Surah Al-Isra 17:15. Before we step into this journey of unseen signs and divine whispers, I want you to pause for a moment. Take a breath, imagine the world not as it seems, and consider the quiet nudges we often overlook. By the end of this episode, you'll begin to notice the subtle threads guiding your conscience, your decisions, and perhaps even the fate of entire communities. So stay with me, because the story today is not just history, it's a mirror to your own life. Introduction. The invisible hand. There are moments in history when the most powerful interventions were not storms, earthquakes, or fire from the sky. They were whispers in the heart, a pause in the natural order, signs so delicate that only the attentive could perceive them. These interventions, often unnoticed, were divine warnings. A call to reflect, a chance to return, a test of awareness. History is littered with tales of civilizations that were warned, yet ignored the subtle nudges, paying the ultimate price. Today, we look at the story of Prophet Lut As and the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the tale of Naila Asaf, who survived a calamity others could not. Their stories are bound by a common thread, divine intervention that was gentle, almost silent, yet unmistakable to those with eyes to see. But this isn't just ancient history. These stories are mirrors for today, where subtle signs may appear as conscience, small coincidences, or societal patterns hinting at consequences. The ability to notice, interpret, and act on these signs is the difference between survival and downfall, between wisdom and regret. Prophet Lut As warnings beyond words. The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were not destroyed overnight without warning. The Quran explicitly reminds us that, we did not destroy a people except that they had been warned, 17:15. These warnings, however, were not always loud or obvious. They were signs embedded in everyday life, subtle nudges meant to awaken conscience. Imagine walking through the streets of a city consumed by its own indulgence. Normal life seems uninterrupted, yet here and there, anomalies appear, a whispered plea, an inexplicable fear among the people, unusual events that hint at imbalance. Prophet Lut As was the messenger, the interpreter of these signs. He did not arrive with spectacle but with words and warnings, inviting reflection. The subtlety of warning lies in its silence. The people were free to ignore it. They could walk past Lut's counsel, laugh at the anomalies, and continue their indulgences. And most did. The signs of imbalance were everywhere. Ethical decay, oppression, and moral blindness. They were small, in comparison to the punishment that followed, but they carried divine weight. Even today, we rarely recognize small signs. A fleeting discomfort in conscience, a repeated warning from life itself, or a subtle pattern in society that hints at impending chaos. These are modern-day equivalents of the warnings given to Sodom and Gomorrah. Signs are everywhere, but how do we recognize them? If the people of Sodom and Gomorrah had simply paused to reflect, their fate might have been different. The same principle applies to us. Life offers subtle interventions every day. These are not always dramatic. Sometimes they are almost imperceptible. Consider these everyday examples. Conscience is a warning. That fleeting feeling of guilt before doing something harmful is a whisper of guidance. Societal patterns. Repeated mistakes in communities, cycles of injustice, or unethical leadership often precede larger collapse. Personal coincidences. The strange delays, small obstacles, or repeated events can be interpreted as signals to reconsider our choices. The challenge lies in discernment. Modern society often drowns subtle cues in noise, constant media, distractions, and external pressures. As a result, subtle guidance is ignored, and consequences appear sudden, even if they were long warned. Lessons from silence. The core lesson from these stories is not fear. It is attention and humility. The divine does not always act in overwhelming force. Often, intervention is gentle, almost invisible, designed to allow choice. The destruction of Sodom was preceded by opportunities for reflection. Naila Asaf's survival was preceded by attentiveness. Key takeaways for modern application. Pay attention to repeated patterns. If something feels wrong repeatedly, it is likely a signal. Reflect before action. Consider the long-term consequences of immediate desires. Trust subtle intuition. That quiet inner voice may be a divine nudge. Observe societal warning signs. Large-scale disasters, ethical decline, or social unrest often provide early indicators if we know where to look. The divine approach is always non-coercive, allowing humans to exercise choice. Warnings are a gift, a chance to correct, adapt, and survive. Ignoring them is often what leads to irreversible consequences. The balance between fear and wisdom. Understanding subtle guidance is a delicate act. On one side, there is fear of consequences, on the other, wisdom to act proactively. Historical narratives of prophets and survivors teach us that the goal is awareness, not paranoia. Sodom and Gomorrah's downfall was not simply due to sin, it was due to ignoring repeated signs. Naila Asaf survived because she interpreted subtle signs and acted wisely, not out of blind luck. For us, the lesson is clear. Life will always present warnings, some loud, many soft. Our survival and moral growth depend on noticing, interpreting, and responding, even when the signs are subtle. Embedded Friendly CTA. If you're enjoying this exploration of history, divine subtlety, and human awareness, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Every story we uncover here is a mirror to your life, and missing these lessons can be costly. Together, let's learn to see the invisible, hear the quiet, and act wisely, because understanding subtle guidance is not just about knowledge, it's about transformation. The human challenge. Listening in a noisy world. Modern life bombards us constantly. Social media, news cycles, and endless distractions. The subtle messages that once were life-saving signs can easily go unnoticed. Our challenge mirrors that of past civilizations. Internal distractions. Ego, desire, and routine dull our perception. External noise. Information overload hides warnings in plain sight. Social conformity. Fear of standing apart often silences the voice of conscience. The divine intervention, in its silent form, is persistent but patient. History shows that when humanity ignores these subtle signs, consequences are severe. The stories of Lut As and Naila Asaf remind us that survival requires attentiveness and humility. Subtle guidance is a daily practice. Incorporating lessons from the past into our daily lives involves practice. Pause and reflect. Before making major decisions, reflect on small anomalies or patterns. Document observations. Keep track of repeated warnings, coincidences, or feelings of unease. Consult wisdom. Guidance from scripture, mentors, or reflective thought can illuminate subtle signs. Act decisively on conscience, awareness. Without action is incomplete, subtle guidance demands response. By training ourselves to notice what is subtle, we cultivate resilience and wisdom. The world continues to provide soft nudges, the difference lies in our capacity to see them. As we step deeper into the narratives of history, one striking observation emerges: humans are remarkably consistent in two ways. First, we tend to ignore subtle warnings, even when repeated. Civilization after civilization has fallen not from sudden shocks alone but from long, patient nudges that were neglected. In the case of Sodom and Gomorrah, the Quran emphasizes, "We did not destroy a people except that they had been warned." 17:15. These warnings came in forms that required attention: signs in daily life, moral decay, whispers of conscience, but most ignored them. Second, some individuals notice, interpret, and respond. Naila Asaf is an example of this second category. Her attentiveness, her ability to read the silent signs around her, allowed her to survive while others succumbed. This contrast is universal. Throughout history, the wise have thrived in chaos not because they were immune to external forces but because they were attuned to subtle signals that others overlooked. The nature of subtle divine intervention. Subtle divine guidance is often almost imperceptible, yet profoundly effective. It differs from dramatic miracles in two ways. It respects human free will. The divine does not force humans to act. Signs are gentle nudges, not compulsion. It requires active perception. Survival and moral correction demand awareness. The signals are embedded in everyday life: an unusual event, a fleeting thought, or a sudden sense of caution. Consider Lut's era. The people saw anomalies: social injustice, ethical corruption, and moral blindness. Lut's warnings were straightforward, but the divine also provided background cues, subtle signs in nature, whispers of conscience, and patterns in society that hinted at imbalance. Only those who were attentive and humble could interpret these as a call to change. In modern times, subtle guidance takes a different form. It might manifest as intuition in decision-making, feeling hesitant before a risky choice, patterns in relationships, repeated conflicts or warning signals from others, societal signals, emerging trends of injustice or corruption that indicate long-term consequences. Recognizing these requires mindfulness and moral clarity, a skill often overlooked in the rush of modern life. Lessons from historical parallels. Subtle guidance is not limited to ancient history. By examining historical parallels, we can understand how humans respond to soft nudges and warnings. The fall of civilizations. Many ancient civilizations fell not from a single catastrophic event but from long-term neglect of subtle signs. Crops failing gradually, small ethical breaches, societal disintegration. These were ignored until the collapse was inevitable. The moral is clear: the divine often whispers before it shouts. Individual survival. Naila Asaf survived because she paid attention to patterns others dismissed. This pattern recognition, seeing cause and effect before disaster strikes, is key to survival. Across cultures, stories of survival often share a common element: the hero noticed what others did not, acted upon it, and trusted inner guidance. The mechanics of recognition. Understanding subtle divine intervention requires recognizing how the signals manifest. Internal signals. Feelings of unease, guilt, hesitation, or inspiration. Often dismissed as imagination or fear. External signals. Natural anomalies, coincidences, or repeated occurrences. Historically, prophets interpreted these for their communities. Social signals, unethical behaviors, societal trends, or the suffering of others often hint at consequences. The challenge is discernment. In a world full of noise, distinguishing meaningful signals from randomness is an art cultivated by reflection, awareness, and moral alignment. Conscience is the modern-day prophet. In many ways, our conscience acts as a modern prophet, a subtle voice warning of imminent moral or practical danger. The problem arises when ego, habit, or external distractions drown it out. The moment we ignore our conscience repeatedly, the cumulative effect mirrors the societies that fell in the past. Conversely, listening, reflecting, and acting on small moral nudges can prevent catastrophe, both personally and collectively. Subtle signs in nature and environment. Divine intervention often arrives through natural phenomena. Unexpected weather changes or environmental anomalies. Sudden illness or fortuitous survival from an accident. Changes in animal behavior or patterns observed over time. These signs were historically interpreted by prophets and sages to guide communities. Today, modern humans often dismiss them as coincidence, missing the lessons embedded in the natural world. By observing patterns and anomalies, and reflecting on them, humans can discern warnings meant to guide them before calamity strikes. Case study: modern societal warnings. Let's consider a modern example. A city begins to experience subtle, repeated patterns, rising corruption, small yet frequent incidents of injustice, growing inequality. To the inattentive, life seems normal. But to those who read the signs carefully, these anomalies foreshadow larger consequences: economic collapse, civil unrest, or environmental disaster. Much like Lot warning his people, there is often a voice, a message, a caution. Ignoring it does not stop the unfolding of consequences, it merely ensures they become inevitable. Small decisions, big outcomes. Subtle divine guidance often appears in the form of choices with moral or practical weight. The smallest decisions, helping someone in need, speaking against injustice, avoiding unethical behavior, can have profound consequences. In the story of Naila Asaf, one decision led to survival while inaction led others to demise. In daily life, choosing to heed conscience, act with integrity, or avoid repeated mistakes can prevent personal or societal disaster. This principle emphasizes that subtle guidance is actionable, not passive. Awareness alone is insufficient. Action is the ultimate test of wisdom. The role of patience and observation. Subtle guidance requires patience. Signs often unfold over time, requiring sustained observation and reflection. The impatient or distracted fail to notice patterns. Societies that collapsed ignored long-term trends in morality and behavior. Individuals who survived were patient, reflective, and discerning. The modern application: cultivate mindfulness, observe patterns, reflect on repeated anomalies, and respond wisely. The psychological dimension. Human psychology complicates the reception of subtle guidance. Ego resistance. Subtle nudges often challenge desires or pride, leading to dismissal. Cognitive bias. We interpret ambiguous events to suit preconceptions, ignoring warnings that contradict beliefs. Social conformity. Fear of standing out or contradicting collective norms silences awareness. Prophets, sages, and historical survivors had to overcome these same challenges. Recognizing subtle divine guidance requires courage, humility, and discernment, as well as the willingness to act alone if necessary. Stories of everyday miracles. Even today, subtle guidance manifests as small miracles in daily life. Consider these scenarios. A driver takes a slightly different route, avoiding a major accident. A student heeds an inner warning to delay a decision, preventing a disastrous mistake. A community responds to early signs of conflict, preventing escalation into violence. Each of these examples reflects the principles illustrated in the stories of Naila Asaf and Naila Asaf. Guidance is present, subtle, and actionable, but only for those attentive enough to perceive it. Reflective practice. Modern readers can develop a reflective practice to enhance awareness. Daily journaling. Record unusual events, coincidences, and feelings of intuition. Meditation and contemplation. Quiet the mind to distinguish subtle guidance from noise. Ethical alignment. Align actions with moral principles, conscience becomes sharper. Pattern recognition. Look for repeated themes in life, relationships, and society. Through these practices, subtle divine guidance becomes visible, transforming ordinary experience into a landscape rich with signs, warnings, and opportunities for growth. Awareness is protection. Ultimately, the theme of this episode is clear: subtle awareness saves lives. Ignorance invites destruction. Attentiveness offers survival. Historical lessons. From Naila Asaf to Naila Asaf. Demonstrate the power of observing, interpreting, and acting on subtle signals. In the modern world, the challenge is greater. Distractions abound, ego clouds judgment, and external noise masks inner signals. Yet, the reward remains unchanged. Those who notice, reflect, and act wisely are protected, not through spectacle, but through the quiet grace of awareness. History is filled with examples where civilizations, despite repeated warnings, ignored subtle signs and faced catastrophic consequences. Sodom and Gomorrah did not vanish overnight. Their moral decay had been evident, their communities repeatedly warned through gentle interventions. The Quran reminds us, "And we did not destroy a people except that they had been warned." 17:15. The warning is a recurring theme across scriptures. In the Torah, prophetic messages were given repeatedly, and in the Bible, wisdom literature stresses that those who ignore correction invite ruin. Proverbs 1:24-31. The human tendency to dismiss quiet warnings often comes from a combination of pride, habituation, and denial. Yet, consequences do not wait for our acknowledgement, they unfold relentlessly, like a storm building silently until it can no longer be ignored. The ancient stories of Naila Asaf and Naila Asaf are not relics, they are mirrors. Consider contemporary society. Warnings about environmental destruction, climate change, and unsustainable consumption have been quiet, persistent, yet largely ignored. Repeated ethical scandals, corruption, and social inequality act as societal, subtle signs. Individuals who heed conscience, avoid unethical paths, and act with foresight often escape consequences that others face. The pattern is clear. Divine guidance, subtle yet persistent, manifests in ways that humans can perceive if they choose to notice. The challenge today is not scarcity of signs, it is our ability to discern and act upon them amidst noise and distraction. The psychology of ignorance. Why do humans often fail to notice subtle guidance? Cognitive dissonance. Subtle signs challenge pre-existing beliefs, causing discomfort. Overconfidence. Belief in control blinds people to warnings. Distraction. Modern life, with its endless stimuli, desensitizes us to nuance. Conformity pressure. The desire to fit in overrides the inner voice of conscience. The ancient narratives show that those who fail to overcome these barriers face inevitable consequences. Conversely, those who cultivate self-awareness, humility, and reflective practice can perceive subtle warnings, even when ignored by the masses. Recognizing the subtle in daily life. The principle of subtle guidance applies not only to catastrophic events but also to personal growth and decision-making. Consider practical examples. Ethical hesitation. That quiet unease before a dishonest choice is a subtle warning. Recurrent patterns. Small mistakes repeated across life signal lessons yet to be learned. Intuition in danger. Fleeting feelings of discomfort can prevent accidents or poor decisions. Social cues. Reactions of colleagues, friends, or community members can hint at underlying issues. By paying attention and reflecting, subtle divine guidance transforms everyday life into a canvas of learning, growth, and survival. Integrating awareness into life. To integrate the lessons of subtle guidance. Cultivate mindfulness. Practice observing without judgment to notice patterns. Document anomalies. Journaling unusual events or feelings sharpens perception. Act on intuition. Inner nudges are signals, not suggestions. Trust and respond. Learn from history. Stories of Naila Asaf and Naila Asaf remind us that neglect has consequences, while awareness brings safety. This is not merely philosophical, it is practical wisdom for navigating both personal and societal challenges. The moral compass and subtle guidance. Subtle guidance strengthens the moral compass. When we heed quiet warnings, we avoid ethical missteps, reduce risk of personal and collective disaster, align ourselves with timeless wisdom reflected in Scripture. The Torah, Bible, and Quran all emphasize attentiveness and reflection. The recurring lesson is, heeding guidance, even when subtle, is a cornerstone of survival and moral integrity. Stories of collective awareness. Throughout history, communities that survived adversity often shared a heightened collective awareness. Leaders heeded repeated warnings. Communities observed patterns and acted preemptively. Ethical vigilance prevented small problems from escalating. Conversely, civilizations that ignored subtle signs fell, sometimes swiftly, sometimes slowly. The difference often rested on attentiveness, humility, and willingness to act. Subtle guidance and spiritual growth. Subtle divine intervention is not only about survival, it is also about spiritual growth. Observing, reflecting, and acting upon quiet signs cultivates patience. Recognizing patterns takes time. Humility. Accepting guidance requires admitting limits. Discernment. Distinguishing meaningful signs from noise is a skill honed over time. Resilience. Acting wisely strengthens character, preventing repeat mistakes. This aligns with the moral lessons of the prophets. Guidance is offered, but human response determines the outcome. The subtlety of timing. Timing is critical. The divine often provides warnings well before consequences manifest. The challenge lies in recognizing that early signs are not urgent in appearance, they require foresight. Naila Asaf warned his people long before destruction, offering opportunity for reflection. Naila Asaf acted on early, subtle cues rather than waiting for catastrophe. Today, small warnings in health, relationships, or society, if ignored, can escalate into irreversible crises. Subtle guidance is therefore both a test of patience and perceptiveness. Human stories of survival and insight. Countless individual stories mirror these principles. A person avoids a seemingly ordinary mistake, only to discover later it would have caused disaster. Communities respond to ethical concerns early, preventing large-scale harm. These modern examples echo ancient narratives. Awareness, humility, and action are timeless tools for survival and wisdom. They show that divine intervention, though quiet, is always present and meaningful. Let's synthesize the lessons. Subtle signs are everywhere. Conscience, environment, and society all communicate guidance. Ignoring warnings is costly. Historical and modern examples confirm this. Awareness requires effort. Observation, reflection, and humility are essential. Action completes the process. Insight without action is insufficient. Spiritual and practical growth are intertwined. Recognizing guidance strengthens morality and survival. These lessons are not abstract. They are actionable and relevant in every facet of life. Reflection and transformation. The stories of Naila Asaf and Naila Asaf are mirrors for our own lives. They challenge us to observe the subtle patterns of our daily existence. Trust conscience and intuition as divine whispers. Respond decisively when faced with ethical, personal, or societal challenges. Learn from the past to shape a safer, wiser future. By internalizing these principles, life transforms from chaos to clarity, from passivity to conscious, guided action. Conclusion. Embracing subtle guidance. In conclusion, subtle divine intervention is silent yet powerful, pervasive yet patient, offering guidance without coercion. Historical narratives show consequences for both attention and neglect. Individual survival depends on awareness and decisive action. Modern life offers countless subtle cues, waiting for recognition. The ultimate message is clear. Life provides whispers of guidance. Survival and growth depend on our ability to hear and respond. Ignoring these whispers is the true danger, not the calamities themselves. If this journey into subtle divine guidance has made you pause, reflect, or reconsider how you interpret daily signs, then you're already taking the first step toward awareness. Remember, the quiet whispers in your conscience, the repeated patterns in your environment, and the moral nudges you feel, these are not random, they are guidance. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so that together we can explore more lessons from history, morality, and the divine. Awareness transforms life. Don't let the whispers go unheard.